If you're used to seeing games on this channel, tonight's a little different. I'm putting down my controller, putting away my mouse and keyboard, and picking up a diamond pen. While I work on this diamond painting, I'll be telling you a variety of scary stories. Same relaxed energy, just with something a little more unsettling. So get comfortable, relax, and let the unease settle in. The ocean has a way of hiding its secrets. It can appear calm, even welcoming, while quietly keeping stories no one will fully understand. In the winter of 1872, the Atlantic Ocean looked much the same as it always has. Wide, gray, endless. And drifting across it was a ship that should have never been alone. On December 4th, a British vessel called the Dei Gratia spotted something unusual on the horizon. Another ship was moving slowly through the water. Its sails were raised at an odd angle, as if no one were tending to them. At first, this wasn't alarming. Ships sometimes drifted while crews rested or adjusted course. But as the Dei Gratia grew closer, something felt wrong. The ship did not respond to signals. No flags were raised. No figures appeared on deck. The name painted along the hull read, Mary Celeste. She was not an unfamiliar vessel. In fact, the crew of the Dei Gratia knew her well. She had departed New York just weeks earlier, bound for Italy. She carried a cargo of industrial alcohol, and aboard her were 10 people. The captain, his wife, their young daughter, and 7 crew members. Seeing her now drifting silently across open water made no sense. A small boarding party was sent across. As their boots touched the deck of the Mary Celeste, the first thing they noticed was the quiet. Not the peaceful quiet of a resting ship, but the unsettling kind, where life feels like it had been interrupted. The sails were partially set, but poorly adjusted. Ropes were loose, and a lifeboat was missing from its place. And yet, there was no damage. No sign of a collision. No evidence of a storm. When they stepped below deck, the mystery deepened. The ship was orderly. Personal belongings were still where they had been left. Clothing was folded. The crew's sleeping quarters showed no signs of panic or struggle. In the galley, food supplies remained untouched. Navigation instruments were present and functional. Even the captain's personal items were still there. Things no experienced sailor would willingly abandon. And yet, the people were gone. Every single one of them. There was no blood, no broken furniture, no written message explaining what had happened. Just a ship that looked as though its crew had stood up and quietly walked away. The logbook provided no clear answers. Its final entries described normal sailing conditions, calm seas, routine progress, nothing that suggested danger. And still, somewhere between her departure and this moment drifting alone on the Atlantic, the Mary Celeste had been abandoned. Not in a hurry, not in chaos, but in a way that suggested a single shared decision made by everyone on board. And whatever led to that decision would never be recorded. As the boarding crew moved deeper into the Mary Celeste, the silence seemed to grow heavier. Ships are rarely quiet places, even when empty. They usually creak, groan, and shift with the movement of the sea. But this ship felt as though it was holding its breath. Below deck, the air was stale, but not unpleasant. There was no smell of smoke, no scent of decay, and no sign that anything catastrophic had occurred. Lamps were still in place. The tools were stored where they belonged. Nothing appeared damaged or out of order. In the crew's quarters, beds were neatly made or only slightly disturbed, as if their occupants had expected to return. Clothing had been left behind. Boots still rested near the bunks. These were not the actions of people preparing to abandon their ship forever. In the captain's cabin, the scene was even more unsettling. Captain Benjamin Briggs was an experienced sailor. He was known to be cautious, deeply religious, and devoted to his family. This voyage was meant to be routine. Inside his cabin, his belongings remained untouched. Papers lay neatly arranged. Navigation charts were still spread across the desk. His wife's personal items were still present. So were his daughters. Nothing suggested a hurried escape, but one detail stood out more than any other. The ship's lifeboat was missing. It had been lowered carefully, not torn away or damaged. This meant that if the crew had left the ship, they had done so deliberately, together, and in an orderly way. But why? The Mary Celeste was seaworthy. Her hull was intact. Her cargo had not shifted dangerously. There was no immediate threat that would justify abandoning a ship in the middle of the Atlantic. The boarding crew examined the cargo hold next. Hundreds of barrels of industrial alcohol were stored below. Most were intact, but a few were found empty. This detail would later become the center of many theories. Industrial alcohol produced fumes, and in enclosed spaces, those fumes can be alarming. Some believe that the crew may have feared an explosion, not because one had already happened, but because they thought one might. If Captain Briggs believed the ship was at risk, he may have ordered everyone into the lifeboat temporarily, planning to return once the danger passed. But the sea does not forgive small miscalculations. A sudden change in weather, a snapped rope, a drifting lifeboat losing sight of the ship. If that happened, the Mary Celeste would have sailed on without them, and the people aboard would have been left behind, with no way back. Yet, even this explanation leaves unanswered questions. Why leave navigation instruments behind? Why take no extra supplies? Why abandon the ship so far from land? The logbook, the only voice left behind, offered very little clarity. Its final entry was dated several days earlier and described nothing out of the ordinary. Calm seas, steady progress, no concerns recorded. Whatever happened next happened suddenly, and it happened without a written trace. As the crew of the Dei Gratia stood aboard the silent ship, surrounded by ordinary objects frozen in time, they were faced with an unsettling realization. This was not the aftermath of chaos. It was the aftermath of absence. The Mary Celeste had not survived a disaster. She had simply been left. And the ocean, as it so often does, kept the rest of the story to itself. To understand why the disappearance of the Mary Celeste is so unsettling, it helps to understand the people who were aboard her. These were not reckless sailors. They were not inexperienced. They were not strangers to the dangers of the sea. Captain Benjamin Briggs was 44 years old at the time of the voyage. He had spent most of his life at sea and was widely regarded as careful, thoughtful, and deeply principled. He was not known to take unnecessary risks. In fact, friends described him as cautious to a fault. This journey was meant to be a steady one. The Mary Celeste had already completed several successful voyages. The route from New York to Genoa was familiar, and the cargo, while flammable, was not unusual for ships of her size. What made this voyage different was that Captain Briggs brought his family with him. His wife Sarah and their young daughter were aboard the ship. This was not uncommon at the time, but it speaks to Briggs' confidence in both the vessel and the journey ahead. A man expecting danger does not bring his family into it. The rest of the crew were experienced sailors as well. Each had signed on willingly. There were no reports of disputes, illness, or unease before departure. The ship left New York on November 7, 1872. Witnesses described the departure as uneventful. There were no warnings, no bad omens, no last-minute changes of plan. For the first part of the journey, everything appeared to have gone exactly as expected. Weather records suggest no severe storms in the area. Other ships traveling nearby reported nothing unusual. The ocean, at least on the surface, was calm. Somewhere along this quiet stretch of sea, something shifted. But whatever caused it did not leave marks or wreckage behind. It only left a decision. Imagine the moment. A conversation on deck. A concern raised quietly. A captain weighing a risk that cannot be measured. Perhaps there was a sound. A bang from below deck. Or the sharp scent of fumes rising through the ship. Perhaps nothing had happened yet, but the possibility of something happening felt too great to ignore. Captain Briggs would have to decide quickly. Stay aboard and risk a danger he could not see, or leave temporarily, trusting that the ship would remain close enough to return to. The fact that the lifeboat was lowered carefully suggests calm, not panic. The fact that personal belongings were left behind suggests expectation. The belief that this separation would be brief. If that was the case, then the most haunting thought of all of this is, they may have believed they were doing the safest thing possible. Once the lifeboat was in the water, the Mary Celeste would have continued drifting. A slight change in wind or current could have carried her away, slowly and silently, just out of reach. From a lifeboat, even a large ship can disappear faster than one might expect. And once the distance too great, there would have been no way back. The ocean is vast. A small boat on open water leaves very little trace. If the crew of the Mary Celeste was lost at sea, the ocean would not announce it. It would simply absorb the evidence. No final words were recorded. No farewell messages were found. Just the suggestion of lives interrupted mid-thought. When the Mary Celeste was eventually brought into port, speculation spread quickly. Newspaper offered explanations ranging from practical to the fantastical. But none could answer the central question. Why would a cautious captain, an experienced crew, and a family expecting a normal voyage all leave a perfectly capable ship behind? The answer, if it exists at all, never made it back to shore. Over the years, there have been countless theories that have tried to explain the fate of the Mary Celeste. Some are practical, some are strange, yet none can account for every detail, and that is why the story continues to captivate imaginations. One idea is that the crew feared an explosion. Industrial alcohol stored below the deck can release dangerous fumes. Perhaps Captain Briggs smelled it rising and ordered the crew into the lifeboat as a precaution. If that was the case, it was a precaution that would prove irreversible. A small mistake, a shift in current, or simple misjudgment could have left the crew stranded. Another theory points to natural phenomena. Sudden water spouts or rogue waves could have convinced the captain that the ship was unsafe. But if danger had actually arrived, why leave behind personal belongings and navigation instruments? Some suggest piracy, mutiny, or foul play. Yet the ship was found intact. No signs of a struggle, no missing cargo, no theft. Others have ventured into the fantastical. Sea monsters, mysterious lights, even alien interference. These explanations are, of course, impossible to prove. And perhaps that is the true allure of the Mary Celeste, the absence of answers. The more we examine the ship, the cargo, the logbook, the crew, the captain, and his family, the less certain anything becomes. The ocean keeps its secrets. It swallows stories quietly, leaving only fragments behind for those willing to imagine what might have happened. Even today, visitors to the Mary Celeste site, or those who study the logs and sketches, report the same feeling. A mixture of awe and unease. A reminder that human decisions, even cautious ones, can meet the vast, indifferent sea. Perhaps the crew made the safest decision they could, given the information they had. Perhaps they were never in danger at all. Perhaps the truth will never be known. And so, the Mary Celeste drifts on through history, a quiet ghost of the sea. Her story is a gentle warning that sometimes the strangest mysteries are not violent, not shocking, but subtle. A perfectly ordinary ship, a calm ocean, and the inexplainable disappearance of 10 lives. In the stillness of the waves, in a hush of a winter Atlantic day, the story lingers. And even as we paint, as we craft, as we move our hands in quiet creation, we can feel the weight of that mystery. The Mary Celeste reminds us that the world is full of questions without answers, and that some stories are meant to be savored slowly, like the gentle, deliberate placement of each tiny diamond on a canvas. Some stories don't ask to be remembered. They wait. If you're still here, it's already too late. This has been Diamonds After Dark. See you next time.